Hello, my name is Ruby. I am a professional tarot reader, astrologer, psychic, sound healer, and I am also a priestess. And today we are going to talk about giving offerings to Deity. I recently had a viewer on my Instagram ask how to give an offering in response to a channel transmission that came from Kali. And I figured that this is a topic that required a little more time than I could give in just a Instagram comment. So we're going to be talking about why we give offerings, how to give offerings, different types of offerings. This is no means the end all be all, but I'll try to at least give you a pretty solid starting point if this is something you'd like to include in your devotional practice, or if you already do include this in your devotional practice and you're just curious how I work with offerings. So I think it's first important to say that giving offerings to Deity is something that has been existing since the beginning of time, really. And it's a practice that appears cross-culturally, across spiritual traditions, and it's even present in modern day dogmatic religion, as watered down as that practice is. And it's also a practice that has been very distorted and corrupted in modern day dogmatic religion. So for example, in mainstream evangelical Christianity, church members are encouraged, maybe even bullied, to give 10% of all of their income and earnings to the church. And then they are told that that's not enough, that additional offerings need to be made on top of that. Now, this is a teaching that obviously benefits the church leadership. However, the spiritual teaching they coded in is that by giving your 10% of your income and by giving your offering to the church, you then open up a portal for God to give you like 10 times more of what you have given. And so even in dogmatic mainstream religion, there is an understanding that an offering is an invocation and a road opener, basically. And that by giving an offering to the divine, we are making space for the divine to then come and bless us and give to us. Now, I think it's important to say that I don't think that offerings are mandatory for working with Deity. So, unlike dogmatic Christian religion, even if you don't give 10% of your income, which, Deity is never going to ask us to give 10% of our income. The offerings that we give to Deity are going to be symbolic of our relationship with that Deity and symbolic of the archetype of that Deity. But it's always going to be something that doesn't hurt us in any way. And deities do not want to give, or they don't want to receive offerings that are hurting us. Now, later on, when I talk about different types of offerings, if we're doing a sacrificial offering, that offering might be uncomfortable for us, but it's going to be the catalyst for growth. So even when our offerings are uncomfortable, they are still going to be in service of greater growth and transformation in our lives. So going back to the point I was making, offerings are not mandatory. We do not need to give offerings to work with Deity. Deity loves us. Deity is going to work with us if we approach Deity with an open, earnest heart. However, offerings are a powerful practice, and I highly encourage you to utilize them if you are working with Deity. Now, I think that offerings are a way that we say thank you. It's not that Deity needs our offering, but I'm a mom, and sometimes I will bring my kid home from school and I'm tired, I've been reading all day, and my kid will ask me for 100 things. Like, Mom, can I have a snack? Mom, can I have chocolate milk? Mom, can you give me this? Mom, can you give me that? And it's really nice if my kid says thank you. And if my kid has an attitude about it, I might start to feel a little bit hey, Can you acknowledge that I'm doing all of this for you? I'm still going to do it regardless because he's my kid and I love him. But I really appreciate the thank yous. The thank yous keep me going. So similarly, like, say thank you to Deity. Like, leave offerings. Like, they do so much for us when we are in relationship with them. And offerings are a way that we build that relationship. So, I think it's really important that we don't think of offerings as transactional, but as relational. So if you see me looking down, I am looking at my notes and just making sure that I get everything out that I want to say, because there's so much I could say about this topic. Okay, so there's certain times that I think making an offering to a deity is especially impactful. If we're working with deity a lot, we don't need to give an offering like every single time we contact that deity. That would be exhausting. But there are certain points in our journey where it is especially impactful or mutually rewarding to leave an offering. And some of those times are when we're first reaching out to a new deity. So if we decided that we want to work with a certain face of deity and we are just coming into contact, one of the ways that we can secure that connection and make contact with that deity is by leaving an offering. Another appropriate time to leave an offering is when we are making a big request or a big petition. So another, appropriate time to leave an offering is at a certain feast day. So for example, Mary Magdalene's feast day is on July 22nd. So I will leave her a offering on that day. So when we're celebrating certain markers in our life, that's a good time to leave a deity. Let's say we did a ritual to Hecate to help us get over a certain addiction, and it's been a year and we have stayed faithful to that commitment. We can leave her an offering of gratitude. So offerings are a way that we connect with deity, we establish relationship. They are a way we give gratitude when we are making a request or a petition, and they are a way that we can honor deity and honor our own progress on our spiritual path. So now I want to talk about the different types of offerings. And I also want to say this, that the type of offering that you leave to a deity is going to really be contingent on the deity itself. So there's no one offering that is best. So it's really important that when you are getting in touch with a specific energy of the divine, or you are looking to build a relationship, that you do a lot of research about that deity, because the mythology and the archetype of that deity, the region they are from, the cultural context of that deity is going to inform the type of offering that you give. And I can give some more examples as we continue to unpack this topic today. So the first type of offering that we're going to talk about is probably going to be the most obvious, and that's physical material items. So food, water, herbs, flowers, incense, candles, etc. Now, the type of physical offering that you leave is, like I said, going to be contingent on the deity that you are working with and how closed and open the practice is. So for example, if you are deciding that you are going to be a devotee of Santa Muerta, and that is the spiritual path you're being called on, there is a lot more stipulation and dedication and rules, I guess you could say, about working with that specific deity. So, there's liquor and cigarettes and very specific food items, and the altar has to have a lot of specific things on it, for lack of a better word. Like there needs to be light on the water, light on the altar. There needs to be water on the altar. Whereas if you're working with a deity like Isis, there's a cultural context to what offerings to give. So we can look historically at what offerings Isis received. We see things like bread that's baked a certain way, honey, there's certain incenses and herbs, so we can use myrrh, we can use musk, but there's more freedom there. There's not as much of a set tradition that if we are engaging in it, it's really important that we engage with reverently and appropriately. So if we're leaving a physical offering, we'll need some type of altar space. So if you don't already have an altar and you are just starting out on this path, it doesn't need to be the most extravagant thing in the world if you're just starting, but a surface or a table that is consecrated just to deity that you spend time at, ideally every day, is going to be where you leave your physical offering. And again, do research around what offerings to give the deity you're working with. And there's tons of information out there. There's books, there's the internet, there's just all sorts of ways that we can learn about deity and contacting the deity itself. So, once you feel like you're connecting in with that energy and that relationship feels established, you can ask your deity, what would you like to receive as an offering? So that's physical and material items. I think that's a really straightforward. There's certain rules that you can engage with loosely based on what pantheon you're working with. So for example, like in the Egyptian tradition, if you're leaving food out at your altar, it's appropriate that at a certain point you eat that food, because what the Egyptian deities are consuming is the ka, or the energy of that food. So you'll kind of get a rhythm to how long to leave offerings out, when to leave them, if you should eat them, if you shouldn't eat them. Like these are things that you are going to learn as you go and as you build relationship with deity. So another form of offering is chants, prayers, and incantation, and devotional practice. So any type of devotional work you do in front of your altar can be considered a form of offering. And this is the most accessible form of offering because we can do it anywhere. And there is a long history of this form of offering, again, cross-pantheon, cross-culturally. So, for example, if you're working with the goddess Hecate, there are a ton of hymns that were written in ancient Greece that you can bring in to that practice of Hecate. When you're researching the goddess Hecate, you can see, okay, part of this lineage with this particular deity is offering hymns, offering praise. And you can either work with that specific hymn that you find. I think there's like an Orphic hymn to Hecate that's popular. I can't remember who the author is. That's Cindy Brennan. You can look at her YouTube page, Keeping Her Keys. She has lots of information on devotional worship to Hecate, or you can write your own. And I think that the incantations and prayers and invocations we write ourselves are always going to be the most intimate and the most powerful, though I don't mean to discourage you from using what's tradition as well. And there's certain deities that I think prefer this type of offering, specifically ones from the Christian pantheon, which they would not like me using that word, but Mother Mary, Yeshua, Mary Magdalene, and by they I mean like the church, not the deities I'm speaking of. They're fine with it. They love it. But Yeshua, leave him a physical offering, bread, wine, that's what is traditional. And he'll take it and he'll receive it well, but you don't necessarily have to with Yeshua. Prayer and mantra are great ways to access that particular energy. So another form of offering, and this is the form of offering I highly encourage you to work with if your goal is transformation, is sacrifice or a promise of a physical change or a physical act. So what this would look like is invoking a certain deity, a certain energy, and offering to give up something, whether that's an substance or a behavior or an addiction, or making some type of devotional pledge for a certain amount of time. And I'm going to give you 2 examples of times I have done this and what the results are as a way to encourage you to engage in this form of offering, because this is the most potent and powerful form of offering that I have personally participated in. However, do not engage in this form of offering if you're not going to follow through. So don't go to your altar and tell Kali, I'm going to give up smoking grass. Don't want to get banned on YouTube or whatever. Like, I'm going to stop using the substance for 30 days and then use it. Don't do that. And like, there is grace on the spiritual path. So like, if you're really struggling and you do that, like, just ask for a lot of forgiveness and chance to neutralize your karma, but take it seriously. Like, don't promise that and then forget about it, and then a week goes by and you're engaging in that behavior. Because these are real energies that we're working with. And even if you are engaging with them in a transpersonal psychology, all of these energies are aspects of my own being, more agnostic way, these beings are still going to show up in your life as real, separate energies if you are making this kind of commitment. That's just how this works. So, I'm cautioning you to follow through on the promises you make to Deity. It's really important. And if you can't follow through, just don't make the promise. So now I want to give you 2 examples of times that I participated in this particular form of devotion and offering and how it paid off for me. So the first time I used this type of sacrifice or promise, pledge of behavior to a deity was I was in a devotional practice to Isis, and I committed 40 days to her. So for 40 days, every day, I gave her an offering, which was a food offering. I gave her like bread and honey, and I was living with other people at the time. So it was like really funny for me to like come upstairs and like make my offering to Isis. It was a moment. So for 40 days, I left food at the altar for Isis every day. I spent devotional time with her every day. I worked with the Isis Oracle by Lana Fairchild every day. And I was aware of Isis like in every part of my life. And about halfway through this experience of devotional offerings every day to Isis, I got this message that a past life gift was going to open up for me. And I didn't know what it was going to be. And shortly after, I was given the gift of astrology. And it's really interesting because I'd always been interested in astrology and like a participant of it and a fan of it, but I always said like, I will never be an astrologer. And when I looked at a natal chart, it was almost like there was a block. Like, I knew a little bit about how the houses worked and how the planets worked, but I couldn't look at it and then just like get 100 downloads about what was contained in that specific chart. And, you know, I could have never made this up, but like shortly after I got that message that a past life gift was coming online, I could look at a natal chart. I could tell you everything that it meant, what all of the aspects meant, and I specifically had a gift in uncovering and unpacking all of the past lives contained in that chart. Now, I've done a lot of study since then to confirm what came through in that gift, and that's a gift that I've continued to develop with reading and taking courses as a way to respect that gift. But that was like a spiritual transcendent experience and gift that was given to me because I made that commitment to Isis, and I followed that through for 40 days. So the second time this gift really paid off for me was, there was a time in my life where I was struggling a lot, and Odin came in. And I'd never worked with Odin before. You know, I mostly work with the divine feminine. And so I was like, okay, what is this about? Why is Odin coming in? So I started Googling, like, what's Odin's deal? Like, I knew very little about the Norse pantheon. So what's Odin's deal? What is he like? How can I serve him? And what I kept reading was that, like, Odin likes gifts of sacrifice. And this is, again, why it's important to do your own research about these deities. And there's this myth of Odin hanging on the tree of life, and through that process of sacrifice, he is given a gift. And so sacrifice is a way that we work with and give offerings to Odin. And so I offered to Odin that for 9 days I was going to give up all of these things. I was going to be totally sober. I was going to eat really clean. I was going to engage in all of these spiritual practices every day. And there was just stipulations to it. And I followed that really all the way through. And in reciprocity, after I followed through in that commitment, doors opened up for me to do tarot work and spiritual work full time. So I say these things to encourage you that the sacrificial offerings, while they are the ones that are the most uncomfortable, because we really are giving things up that might be comfortable, that when we push ourselves towards growth, that's always when we are rewarded the most by the divine. Now, there's one more offering that I want to mention, and this is something that came through when I was channeling Kali on my Instagram the other day. And I've since thought about this a little more, and it makes a lot of sense. But if we are working with a face of the dark feminine, so Kali, Ereshkigal, Hecate, we can give them our pain and our tears and our grief and our negative emotions as an offering. And something I love about the teachings of Bhakti is that all of our emotions are divine, and all of our emotions, even the uncomfortable ones, our longing, our grief, our heartbreak, our sadness, all of these are pathways and portals into the divine. And that actually that feeling of heartbreak and loss, the root of it inside of us is heartbreak and loss of the separation from the divine. And so if you are someone who is very emotionally cracked open, or you are in a process of hardship or grief, use that as an offering. Use that as a way of worship to the divine. And I guarantee you that something's going to shift. The situation might not change in the material realm. Like if you're grieving the loss of a loved one, that's a pretty fixed situation, but you will be surprised how you change and how you alchemize and how you are held in your grief. by taking part of this process. So that's pretty much all I have to say about the types of offerings. Now, y'all, I my nose runs when I'm channeling, which means that I'm just gonna be a mess all the time when I'm making videos, and I am so sorry for being gross. So I guess the one final piece I will share with you before I close out is just a little bit of how I leave an offering and the process of leaving an offering. So to leave an offering, ideally you'll start out at your altar space. If you're in a time of crisis and you're in your car and you are going to offer incantation or prayer as an offering, still start by dropping in, taking a few deep breaths and coming into presence. And then if you are, for example, let's say I'm leaving this crystal as an offering, just begin to hold that, to find presence and stillness within yourself, to settle into the space of your heart. And then from the heart space, speak really genuinely and authentically to the deity you're working with. So I have Hecate over here at my reading table. So, Hecate, I just want to thank you so much for all you've brought into my life. And I really honor this relationship I have with you. And I want to leave this crystal at your altar now as a way to demonstrate how grateful I am to have this connection with you. And so, Hecate, this is for you, and I honor you, and I let this offering be a testament and an outpouring of the devotion I have for you. It can be as simple as that. It can be more simple than that. And if there's a specific request or petition you have, you can include that. So, I'm really needing this thing in the material plane, so this is my request, and as a way to show my gratitude at this request being made manifest, please accept this offering. And so give the offering to the deity, give the offering to the altar space, and then you can take a few minutes just to sit in that space of intention, sit in that sacred space. And then if there's anything that wants to come through, you have sat in an open, receptive posture. And sometimes I'll just hear a thank you from the deity. So I just felt a feeling of warmth come my way that I'm assuming, or I'm knowing, there's a knowing inside that is from Hecate. And also a little bit of, she's roasting me a little bit because that was on camera and for camera. So she's like, thanks. But you'll come to know the ways that your deity speak to you, and deity is funny. Deity and I are often roasting each other very lovingly and playfully. So that's real. We don't need to be so serious and austere all of the time in how we communicate with the divine. So I hope that was helpful. I hope that was clear. I think that's everything I wanted to say. But if you have any questions on offerings, feel free to leave it in the comments. I guess the one thing I'll mention before I close out is you'll get an understanding of how often to give offerings to specific deities. Like I said, this isn't something that you need to do every day unless you feel called to do it every day. I do it more than most, probably because I am a priestess, and so this devotional work is part of my sacred calling. But if you're trying to devote yourself to a deity, I just want to encourage you to release the pressure. That if we're coming with authentic, heart-led intentions, we're we're gonna be okay. So, as always, I am wishing you well, and I will see you soon.